Hello, you are listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira.
Hi, I'm Tammy.
And I'm Thomas.
And today, this episode is titled Stop Imagining.
Right.
This is the solution to all your problems.
That's right. It's a solution to one problem, which is the problem of anxiety. And I find that our clients, when I say our clients, I mean a lot of Tammy's clients, the
coaching clients.
the gals,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure the guys have anxiety too, but they don't.
It manifests.
It manifests differently.
Yeah.
But a lot of our gals are just freaking out about what's going to, oh my gosh, what if he does this? Oh my gosh, what if the child does that? And
what if the court does this?
What if the court, and all this. So I'm going to start out this episode with a parable. And the parable goes as follows. Actually, it's a riddle. It's not a parable. But the riddle goes like this. Okay. Imagine that you're inside a box, that your whole body is inside the box, that the box is made out of titanium. It's a very strong box, and it is welded on each of the corners. And the door has a huge lock on it that would take the FBI and the CIA to get this lock, and you're stuck in it. It has no windows. Okay.
Why doesn't it just have no doors either? And why is it titanium?
Why? Because there had to be a way for you to get into the box.
Okay. All right.
So imagine that you're in this box and it has no way of getting out. There's no door. There's no windows. It's welded together. You can't destroy it. It's indestructible. How do you get out of the box? Okay. Now I'm going to give our listeners a few minutes to think about this.
Sing a little Jeopardy song. Is that a violation of some copyright or something?
Here, you sing the Jeopardy song and I'll do the TikToks. Go.
No.
Or you do the TikToks.
I don't know. Are we even allowed to do that? I'm not sure. No, that's enough. One round's all we can take of you doing that.
Okay, what's the answer, Tammy?
Stop imagining.
How many of you got that? Raise your hands.
It's the title of the episode. I hope somebody got it.
Yeah, raise your hands. If you didn't get the title to that, then I was about to say something mean. But
Then we're going to help you get it.
Right, we'll help you get it. So stop imagining. So what does that mean in real terms? Tell me a story about one of your clients who needs to stop imagining.
Oh, well, I didn't know you were going to put me on the spot. Well, I would say I'll tell you about myself because I used to be a big what-iffer.
Right.
I mean, everything in my life was what if during my marriage. I mean, what if we don't have enough money to pay the bills next week? What if something happens to one of the kids? What if the car breaks down? What if I
the
lose
plane
my
crashes?
job? What if a plane crashes? What if somebody gets in a car wreck? I would say I spent a fair amount of energy on those types of issues. And, I think that things like this sort of sometimes come with age and life experience. You just kind of, it's weird because my experience is the things that we're worried about are the things that
never happen.
And the stuff that actually happens are the things that we weren't sitting around worrying about.
Well, that's not that reassuring.
Well, I'll give you an example. So, it was a big what if all the time for me. I never imagined, if you had asked me, I would never have imagined that my ex-husband would have wanted a divorce.
Yeah.
I was floored when he asked for a divorce. Now, I'm not saying that, he didn't really formally ask for a divorce. He just started having affairs. So when he, started conducting himself in a way that was leading to divorce, I was floored because, he was very, very dependent on me for a lot of things. And it never occurred to me that he would leave and go somewhere else. I mean, it's not like, I can't say that the marriage was fantastic. I didn't have any frame of reference at the time, but I guess there was a fair amount of conflict and discord and all that kind of stuff. But, it was just normal. I just thought it was normal and everybody's marriage was like that. And, I didn't really think too much about it. And, and then, so when he asked for divorce, I was just really caught off guard. And the other thing that happened for me in my life that was just a complete blindside is, about 7 or 8 years after the divorce, my mother passed away suddenly of a heart attack at the age of 62. Now, I had really it had never occurred to me. I mean, I thought my mom was going to be, last man standing, so to speak, out of mine and my ex-husband's. I mean, this was after the divorce, but of our 4 parents, in relation to my children losing their grandparents and all that kind of thing. My mom was the youngest one and all that. And I just thought she would be here beyond everybody else. And she was only 62 at the time. My dad's about 5 years older, so he was 67. My dad's 74. Thankfully, I still have him with me. And actually might be 75 now. I think he turned 75 this year. So So thankfully I still have him, but that was a total blindside for me because I didn't see that coming. And so, but all the things that I was worried about, what if I'm homeless? What if I can't afford groceries? What if I can't, pay the bills and do all these things? None of that has happened,
Right.
None of those things have happened. The major things that I wasn't thinking about is what has happened.
Okay. Right. So you're worried about things that don't. The main thing is when I am worried about a hearing or something, when I'm having anxiety about court, which rarely happens, but when I'm having anxiety about court, I'm usually worried about the unknowns. What's going to happen. So, oh gosh, I need a continuance of this case. So what if they don't grant it?
Right.
What if they force me to argue the case?
Right.
What if I lose the case and then I get sued for malpractice?
And it's really funny because every time you start having these feelings, I start saying, well, has the court ever not continued it when you both agree and request it? No.
Right.
Well, has anybody ever sued you for malpractice? No. Well, have you ever,
Right.
No. And it's like, okay, then why? I mean, because you've been practicing law for over 30 years now.
Right.
And none of those things have ever happened. And yet every single time you have a hearing, this starts coming up.
Yeah,
for you.
it creeps into my mind. And it's like, why are we afraid of flying on airplanes?
Because it might crash and fall out of the sky.
Because you're flying at this ungodly height.
Yes.
At
an ungodly speed.
At an ungodly speed in a big giant projectile. Okay.
Right. What could go wrong?
Yeah. But really, what could go wrong?
Right.
In the United States today, there are literally hundreds of thousands of commercial airline flights every day.
Right.
Every day. Okay. And at each one of them, the plane takes off, you fly through the sky, and then it lands at its destination.
Right.
I was just Googling while Tammy was talking about the last thing. And I learned that according to CNBC, the last fatal U.S. airline crash was a decade ago. That's 10 years of no fatalities. Okay. So given that, what are the odds that you're going to be in an airline crash?
It's very small.
Very small. Very, very,
but I
very
always
small.
say
You have a much better chance of winning the lottery than being in a fatal.
Gotta play.
Right.
But what I always say is this: like, it doesn't matter how minute the chance, if it happens and it's you.
Right.
It's like saying, oh, there's, I used to work.
That's not very reassuring.
Well, I mean, let's just talk about both sides of the coin, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
I used to work in cardiac surgery before I went into financial analysis and started doing that and then started working for Thomas. But But my original career was in healthcare, and I worked specifically in cardiac surgery. And they do, the most surgeons do 2, 3, usually 2, I think, 2 open heart. Sometimes they can do 3 if they work a really, really, really long day. But,
Yeah.
Usually 2 open heart surgeries a day. You do 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. And, I worked at the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale. And so we had a surgeon in surgery every single day. And that's not including the emergencies and all that. But you just figure 2 surgeries a day, 365 days a year. I mean, you're talking 600, 700, 800, surgeries at least.
Right. That's a lot of broken hearts.
Right. Yeah. Every single year. And so, and that's just that facility, right? That's not anybody else that's doing them. So,
and how many fatalities?
Yeah. So the percentages are pretty low. And actually, I wish I could remember them more specifically, but it's definitely like low single digit percentages.
Yeah, it's like 3 of them.
Like you want like 1 to 2. I think the surgeons average, I want to say they start creeping up to 2%. It's something that's looked at, I think.
Right. They start,
I'm not sure. They have
board
standards.
Starts to scrutinize your practice if you're losing more than 2 out of 7 or 800 a year.
Yeah. Right. I mean, there's certain standards that they have to meet. And so obviously it's a very, very safe surgery. Like the chances of, something happening are low.
But that's what we all worry about.
But that's what we all worry about. And the thing is that I always say that's all well and good that there's that statistic until it's you on the surgery table. And then it's a whole different can of worms. And that's really really the problem, right?
But the source of anxiety is imagining things that are unlikely to happen.
Right.
So the minute we go in for that heart surgery or get on an airplane, we're thinking about the worst thing that could happen.
Right.
So you're sitting there in your chair. You don't have any control. It's kind of like being in court. You don't have control over the outcome. Your fate is in the hands of the court.
Right.
And like the airline, you got to buckle your seatbelts. You do everything you can do.
Yeah, and then you got to rely on the pilot.
And then you got to rely on the pilot and ultimately on your maker to protect you in that situation. But the cause of the anxiety isn't the thing.
Right.
The cause of the anxiety is your imagination.
Your thoughts about the thing.
Right. Hence, stop imagining.
Right.
So every time that you're worried about court, and here's how it goes. Oh gosh, I've got court tomorrow, and he's got a lawyer, and I don't have anybody, and I'm afraid that he's going to take my kids away from me. I'm afraid that the court is going to listen to his lawyer's argument. It doesn't matter that the kids have lived with me full time for the last 5 years, and Dad hasn't seen them in 3 of those years, and he's an alcoholic and a drug addict, and uses heroin on the side. You're worried because he's got a lawyer and you don't know what's going to happen at that hearing.
Right.
So when you don't know, you imagine the worst.
Right. That's true.
You imagine that that they're going to take the kid, and sometimes the court does have a plane crash, but it is so rare as to be virtually non-existent.
Right.
And so when you catch yourself worrying, fantasizing about that income, remember the guy in the box.
About the income?
Or about the outcome, excuse me.
Oh, I'm like,
did I say income?
Yeah, you did. I'm
my
like,
goodness.
what, money? Or what are we talking about?
I got to stop smoking marijuana before we do these podcasts.
Yeah, don't say things like that.
Don't say
people
that.
Don't know.
Because people think
think
I'm not kidding.
Yeah,
but,
he's kidding.
Right. We are against marijuana,
yeah,
especially with teenagers.
Especially with lawyers going on podcasts.
Because you can imagine what that does to your brain, right? No, but you got to stop. Think of the guy in the box.
Right.
Okay. Because we always imagine catastrophe.
Yeah, we do.
And you go down to that. This is what's going to happen.
Okay, tell us.
You're going to go to the hearing, and that fancy lawyer in that fancy suit. He's going to get up. He's going to stand up at the podium, and he's going to put his elbow on the podium, casual, and he's going to say, "Your Honor, this child needs to be in the custody of the father. There's clearly parental alienation going on here, and the child won't speak to him, and
Right.
Okay. And then it's going to be your turn to speak. The judge is going to turn to you and say, "What have you to say about this? What's your thing?" And you're going to go, "I'm just really nervous right now." And the judge is going to say, "Don't worry about it. Don't be nervous. Just tell us what your position is." The judge is going to be nice to you, first of all, which is unexpected. I would say 99 times out of 100, the judge is nice to the pro pers. And the only reason there's another 1% is because some idiot pro pers come out of the gun attacking the court.
Right.
But normally they're gonna help you,
Right.
okay, with your case.
Right.
And then you're gonna say, well, and then the court's gonna say, "Well, how long's it been since Dad's seen the kid?" "Oh, about 3 years." "And are there any dangers that you are worried about?" "Well, there's that little thing about the heroin addiction and the fact that he's living on the street." Well, all the things. And you're going to walk out of there going, "What the heck was I so worried about?"
Yeah. Or what happens a lot too is
Yeah.
Thomas, a lot of times will come back from court and it's like, "Oh, it was continued." Like there's so many continuances and you get all worked up for that 3 or 4 days before the hearing. And then you go in and it's continued and it's like, "Oh my goodness, we got to ramp back up for this again."
Right.
But in that case, and whether it's mom or dad, I mean, I know you're using dad as the example, but whether it's mom or dad, I think that what happens a lot of times is, as a self-represented party, they attack the other person. And not that Thomas is saying, if there's concerns about alcoholism or this or that, you bring them up. We're not saying don't bring them up, but you don't want to bring them up in this
Defensive.
like almost a disdain for the other person. Like,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, they're an alcoholic and they're this and they alienate and they do
Right.
these things." Like I would say, if you're a mom and you're worried about dad being an alcoholic, then you would say, "Your Honor, I'm concerned because he drank very heavily during the marriage. Normally, a 12-pack of beer a night, try to be specific about what it was. And I'm concerned that,
Right.
If the child is in his care and he's under the influence of alcohol, the child's very young, they're only 3 years old, and they would
Right.
be at great risk." Instead of saying, "Well, he's just an alcoholic. He drank all the time. Heck, he drank 12 beers a night most nights." And, that comes across as I'm angry at him. And same thing for dads with alienation is something we hear a lot from dads. If you just go in and you're like, "Oh, well, she's alienating me and she doesn't want me to be around the kid and she just hates me and and you're just throwing out all these things that the court really has no tangible way of,
Right.
assessing, I guess is a good word, then it kind of just falls on deaf ears. So if you are feeling like the other parent is alienating you, then what you might say is, "Your Honor, I haven't been able to have a visitation with the child in over 30 days. I've made multiple requests. Here are copies of my emails asking to see the child at various dates and times. Mom constantly refuses and says the child is unavailable. I've also attempted telephone contact and I never get, nobody ever answers the phone. Here's my phone log showing all my phone attempts." Like tangible things that the court can look at and say, "Okay, there's evidence that this is happening." And when I'm talking about the alcohol situation, your observations during the marriage of what the behavior was is tangible evidence. A lot of people seem to think that, what they have. They don't realize that what they have to say about the situation is actually evidence.
That's true. That's true. And you certainly want to get some coaching around your presentation, and that's what I do a lot with our clients. And we have a really good record on child custody.
Right.
But what we do is we coach our clients on their demeanor in court. We coach them on how to approach the recommending counselor or the expert or the custody evaluator, whoever it is. There's a way to approach that person that'll get you what you want.
Right.
And there's a way to approach that person, on the other hand, that will get them to side with your opponent.
Well, and we coach on communication as with the co-parent as well.
Yeah.
I would say if there's one thing in my experience that has the tendency to make or break your case a lot of times, it's the communication.
Yep.
And the reason
Communication's huge.
the reason is because you end up with your communications. Maybe you have a communication app you're using, like Our Family Wizard or Talking Parents, which are both great apps. There's a lot of different apps, but those are kind of the two most common, or you're just doing it through email, whichever. But it's like people print out, those communications and submit them to the court. And if you can have a communication log that looks like the other person's behaving badly and you're behaving well, then that helps you. But you have to know what the court sees as behaving well.
Right. And the anxiety can make you look bad.
Right. It can cause you to be reactive.
Now we've given them something else to be anxious about. Don't be anxious.
It can cause you to be reactive because you're scared. You're acting out of fear.
Yeah. When you're acting out of fear, this can magnify. But here's another analogy. When you go and get in your car to drive, there's all kinds of maniacs out there. And,
yes, there are.
And and they're all driving those Dodge Chargers, right?
You might have somebody listening that's driving a Dodge Charger.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we have Tammy and I have an inside joke about that. It seems always to be it's either the Dodge Charger or the
Ford Mustang.
or the Ford Mustang, and
not to say all Dodge Charger or Ford
and I
Mustang
can tell you,
drivers are jerks, but just a high percentage of them.
The Ford Mustang was my midlife crisis car.
Yes. So you're a recovering jerk.
I'm a recovering jerk, but no, it's dangerous out there.
Yeah,
okay.
it is.
So what you have to do is you have to take control over those things that are within your control.
Right.
Right. So first of all, buckle your seatbelt.
Right.
That's always a good idea.
Right.
Adjust your mirrors. Make sure that your windshield's clean so you can see well. And then drive, as Tammy says, drive defensively. Right.
Yeah. Stay to the right.
Be
drive
aware.
Slower,
Be present.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's the same in court. Those people and those outcomes are, in a sense, outside of your control.
Yeah.
But there are things you can control. You can control your demeanor.
Right.
If I find that when my client is anxious and angry appearing, that I don't do as well in court.
Right.
Okay. And so I try to coach them, if look straight ahead, don't make facial expressions, don't mutter, "That's a lie," under your breath, but just loud enough for the court to hear. Don't do those things. Okay. Don't disrespect the court. But, these are things that can be coached. These are things that are inside of your control almost exclusively. Okay. But once you've done that, stop imagining. Stop worrying that the court, instead of continuing the case, is going to make a ruling against you because you weren't ready.
Right.
Okay. I use that because that's a fear that I have.
Right.
Okay. Stop imagining. It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes the court does weird stuff, but not very often. Okay. Most of the time, predictably, they want the children to have both parents in their lives.
Right.
Okay. Predictably, they want the children to be safe. Predictably, they want there to be less conflict and more cooperation in the co-parenting relationship. These are all things that you can go into your house. You can bet money on this. Okay. So those are the buttons to push. Okay. And if you're worried, if you know, that's what causes you to mess up. If you're worried, if you're anxious, if you feel defensive, I always tell my guys, guys, when you appear in court, be positive about yourself.
Right.
Don't be negative about her.
Right.
Be positive about what a great dad you are and what a blessing it is for this child to have you as their father.
Right.
Okay. That's your best argument most of the time.
Right. Right. And people do the opposite, and they go in and they sort of dump all their fears on the court. And, they say things like, well, I'm worried if the other parent has parenting time, this will happen, that'll happen, blah, blah, blah.
I'm afraid they'll take the child to China or something.
Well, and the court really is not in the business of making orders based on what ifs, based on people's fears. They just don't do that. They make orders based on what's actually happening at the time.
Right.
So
because the court's not God, it can't see the future.
Right. Right. And it doesn't pretend to try to be able to see the future.
Right.
So you're not, I say this to my moms a lot. You're not going to get an order based on what your fear of what's going to happen is until something actually happens, which is very unsettling.
That sucks,
Let me just say, yes, as a mother, probably as a father too, but I've only ever been a mother, so that's the only piece I can speak for. But as a mom, telling somebody that there's nothing you can do until something actually happens to your child is a very hard pill to swallow.
Right.
But it's essentially the pill of divorce. I mean, that's just what comes with the territory. Right. And so, you, like Thomas said, you do what you can. And so for your child, what does that involve? Putting them in therapy, and making sure that they have a place to talk about things that are happening in both worlds, or, making sure that they know they can trust their teacher. Or sometimes there's school counselors that you can have them, see during school hours, and all these different resources. A lot of that kind of stuff is shared in my coaching group of just, different resources and things like that, and people's experiences with the different resources and everything, so that you can get things in place that help you head off any potential things that may happen to the child. But that information ends up coming through third-party resources that aren't you.
Right. And you know what? You've got this. Really, you've got this.
Yeah.
People think that that some horrible thing is going to happen. Tammy always worries about me when I go surf because she thinks I'm going to get eaten by a shark. Okay. And what I always say to her is, it's way more dangerous on the drive to the beach than it is out in the water. It's way more dangerous, by a factor of 10.
I know, but then I feel like you're being complacent about the fact that there could be sharks in the water.
Yeah, well, if I see the shark coming at me, it's pretty much I'm pretty much done anyway.
No, you punch it, right? Isn't that?
That's right. You punch it. That's what Mick Fanning did,
Mick
right?
Fanning, yeah, he's a surfer. We were watching
punch that shark right in the nose. You punch him, and I'll make sure and do that. Tammy,
should be your last thought. Tammy said, "Punch the shark."
That's right. Tammy, come here and punch this shark for me.
I'm not there.
Yeah. But the dangerous part of my surf session is driving to the beach.
Yeah, statistically.
Right. And that's the same as your court appearance. The court doesn't want to make a decision that's one-sided and unfair. The court doesn't want the child to not have access to a parent, the child, or to be subject to dangers.
Yeah.
So you got to have faith in the process.
Yeah.
And just relax and stop imagining, stop thinking about all the things that could be catastrophic.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say that, the court doesn't get it right all the time, and bad things do happen sometimes. But I think that, Thomas's point is that statistically, chances are, the court is going to dig enough to try to get the facts that they need to make the right decision. And here's the thing. Even when they make the wrong decision, and we have seen that in some cases, then what you have to do is take a long-term strategy. It doesn't mean that all hope is lost. That's not
Correct.
what it means. It means you take a long-term strategy and you figure out what needs to be done to let that other parent, to give that other parent enough rope to hang themselves, is what I always say.
That's right.
In my experience, if that other parent really truly has as many issues as the one parent thinks they do, they're going to
mess up.
They will not be able to maintain over the long haul. Right.
Right.
They might be able to hold it together in the short term for the initial court
just till the hearing's over.
Right. But once that's done over the long term, they usually cannot.
That's right. And so you go into long-term mode and you start keeping a record.
Right.
And that record, Lord willing, you'll never need it.
Right.
But you create that record and you have that file handy in case stuff blows up. And then when she messes up and starts talking about the litigation with the child or something of that nature, then you'll have another crack at it later.
Right. That's right. Right. But you got to take that. You got to go into creating a record and planning and strategizing and your long-term stuff.
And you have to be the normal one.
Right.
You have to be the one that the court looks at and goes, ooh, I think the child's better off with her.
Yeah, or him.
Or him, yeah.
Yeah, and let me just say for all the, other women out there that, our emotions do work against us in a lot of ways in these situations. I've seen a lot of moms that get really emotional, really worked up, and have so much stress and anxiety that they can barely function out of fear of what's going to happen. And so when you have that, then you go into court, and that sort of hysteria, for lack of a better word, comes through in how you're behaving and how you're speaking in court.
Right.
And then that gives the court even more maybe dad's right, because, she does seem to be a little bit, extreme and anxious and, all these kinds of things. So you actually end up hurting yourself more because you're engaging in the negative thoughts, thoughts leads to feelings, leads to actions, right?
Correct.
So you have to start by controlling your thoughts. Right.
Right. I'm sorry to.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to end by giving them a technique.
Okay.
Okay. And this is what I do. This comes from Kanoa Igarashi. Okay.
Who's also a surfer, if you don't know that name.
Kanoa Igarashi is one of the best surfers in the world.
Right.
And sometimes when you're a professional surfer, you have to face really dangerous surf conditions. Like they expect
big
you
waves.
But they expect you to perform
right
in an atmosphere of fear. So a lot of pro surfing is about mastering fear.
Right.
Okay. And I felt that way when I'm out. Like I remember about 3 months ago, I was at Tamarack and waves are big. It's like 6 to 7 feet, and I'm not a young man.
Right.
So, so what's going through my head is, this wave's going to crush me. I'm going to have
I'm going to be laying at the bottom of the ocean. Tam will be wondering where I'm at.
Yeah, that's right. And this is what's going on. And what I have to do, and this comes from Kanoa, first of all, take some deep breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And just focus, instead of focusing on what you're worried about, begin by focusing on your breath. And that's what he does. And usually that stops it. Okay. If you really can't stop it, then tell your imagination to imagine a good result or a positive thing, or think about something that has to do with the kid that just warms the cockles of your heart. But these things are hidden in your memory, and their purpose is to help you to regulate your anxiety. I have a lot of personal experience with anxiety, so I know what this is about. But
yeah, I mean, what if you go into court and everything goes well and you get everything you wanted?
Yeah.
If even just saying that.
That's happened to me.
Even just saying that sentence out loud, it changes your whole internal state.
Right.
Because you start feeling positive instead of constantly thinking of the worst.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So we hope that little tip helps you. And
that's a good tip.
That is a good tip. If you are listening to the podcast, don't forget to rate and review us, and also subscribe so that you get notified as the new episodes are released each week. If you're watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit like and subscribe below this video, and also Well, I already said subscribe, but hit like and subscribe so that you also get notified of the video releases each week. And we'll talk to you soon.
Be well and stop imagining.
Thank you for listening to the Divorce University online podcast with your hosts, Thomas and Tammy Ferreira. For more information, visit www.divorceuniversityonline.com.